Hell Let Loose is a game revered by thousands of people, and some of them might consider it to be the best World War II shooter on the market. Yet, of all games that I've covered on this channel, it was the hardest game for me to actually appreciate as to why people like it so much, and I'm going to talk about why thousands of people played this game and what I like about it, as well as why it took me over 50 hours for it to finally click and whether it might be worth your money in 2025. To start off, Hell Let Loose is a first-person tactical shooter set in World War II, and it is made by the company Black Matter, and the game released in 2019, but initially it started on Kickstarter back in 2017, where it raised over 300,000 Australian dollars. The game features multiple different theaters that have you playing as the Red Army in Stalingrad in the east, or as the US Army in the west fighting against the Germans. From the looks of it, they do plan on implementing more factions such as the British, Canada, and Japan. I would love to see the Pacific Theater implemented because Rising Storm 1 did it beautifully. Now, each faction have their own weapons and uniforms, but what sets it apart from a game like Postscriptum, for example, is that there is cosmetics that you can unlock, as well as you can level up your classes to unlock better weapons and equipment. Now, some of you might find this a criticism of the game, as some of you I'd say are more traditional in the sense that you just want what's available in a historical sense and don't want any fancy cosmetic unlocks or weapon unlocks. Personally, I don't mind it because I like having something to grind for, and as long as they don't release a cosmetic that could be considered pay to win, as well as doesn't destroy historical accuracy to a battlefield extent, I'm not too fussed. But in terms of the classes, it's fairly similar but also unique compared to other games. So you have the officer, who is basically the squad leader, who is tasked with giving orders to your squad as well as building spawn points. Now, as someone coming from Rising Storm 2 Vietnam, this confused me so much for the longest time, and to put it in simple terms, an outpost is like a squad tunnel. Only you and your squad can spawn on it, and you can pretty much build them anywhere with a few exceptions. But then there's a garrison, which is like a squad tunnel, except for the whole team. But the thing is, these are so important because if you have squad leaders not building these, you're going to have to spawn at the main area and you're not going to have a good time, and you'll have people complain that it's a walking simulator. But you also have the rifleman, which is just shoot bad guys and capture points, the assault class, which has smoke screens, the automatic rifleman, which uses, well, I think you can put 2 and 2 together, but there is a medic class which is underused and fairly frustrating as well to play as, and that is because there is no ticket system, but they are also the only people in the game that can revive down teammates. And I found compared to other games like Squad and Postscriptum, people don't wait for me to come and revive them, especially since spawning is wave based. It isn't like Squad where if you wait to be revived and then give up, you'll have like a 0-second respawn timer, because if you wait for a medic to come, then you end yourself, and then you could be waiting upwards of like 30 seconds to respawn. So personally, I didn't like that too much because I definitely did have people just give up right as I was about to revive them, and it was extremely frustrating. But you also have the support class, which is fairly unique because they can carry supplies for the squad leader and engineer to build structures, and some of these structures that the engineers can build are repair stations for tanks, as well as a unique thing called nodes. I had no idea what these were until recently, and I thank this Reddit guide that actually helped me out. It was like a game manual, and for the first time in history, Reddit didn't produce utter shit. It produced something helpful, and thanks to this guide, I had a lot more fun playing the game. But staying on topic of the manual, the game really does need a tutorial. At the moment, you can only read the in-game sort of manual. Yet again, I didn't get too much use out of that, because if we look at a game like Squad, I really sort of understood roughly what I was supposed to do based on the tutorial, because they outlined how the weapons handled and how the different spawn structures worked. And I heard in the past the reason why there's no tutorial is because just in case if they change how the way the game functions and then they need to change the tutorial. But I still think if they develop some testing area that has like cards that'll say, oh, this is what an outpost is, this is what a node does, it has a brief description and it actually shows you in game what it looks like, I still feel like that'll be better than the current system that they have. But for the longest time, I've heard people say to build nodes, and I just thought those were the outposts. but turns out you need to build them because it allows the commander to call in special abilities, as well as it impacts the cooldown times for some other classes. But the engineer is a fun class because rather than going out and fighting, you can stay far from the action and play as an indirect supportive role for your team. But to be able to build anything in this game, you need supplies, and they are one of the most important things in this game. And if you don't have a constant supply that's being given by the support class, the commander, or people using these supply trucks, you are going to get steamrolled no matter how good your team is. You also have the machine gunner who can lay down suppressive fire, and an anti-tank role, which the first time I used it, I missed point blank from behind a tank and I got yelled at. You have the commander, who is usually the person that gets blamed alongside the officer if your team loses, but they can deploy a range of abilities such as supply drops, which can help officers build garrisons, and airhead, which in RS2 terms is like a commander deploy, except it can be spawned on for like 3 minutes and it can be deployed pretty much anywhere. You have planes that can provide reconnaissance, as well as strafe with machine gun fire or create a wall of explosions that can be really scary. But commanders can also spawn in vehicles and have a reinforce ability that helps with capturing a point. But you have a complete separate section for snipers, that being the recon squad. You have the spotter and a sniper, and the main purpose of this class is pretty cool because you have to analyze where enemies are coming from and relay it back to the squad leader chat. It's almost like you're playing as a spy, and you're also tasked with disrupting enemy artillery that you can find in those spawns. You also have the armor squads, which are tasked with using the heavy machinery that range from scout tanks from the Puma all the way to heavy tanks like the Tiger 1, but they handle like clunky mechanical beasts, which is a good thing because turning around in these or turning the turret takes forever. You need to use your judgment when firing at range because you won't be 100% accurate at times. But the tanks really do capture a sense of claustrophobia, especially since as the driver you only have one view. The gunner can zoom in and out, but there's no interior, so you have to rely on your limited vision as well as what your spotter can see, which is the only person in the tank with 360-degree vision. But in terms of maps, apparently they are modeled off real-world locations and they are even to scale, and this is because they use satellite imagery and information from historical archives to develop them. In terms of the way maps look and play out, some of them look absolutely beautiful, especially night and snow maps, but in terms of the overall size, they are pretty massive since they need to cater to a 50v50, but while there are usually 2 zone caps active, you can go pretty much anywhere you like, even into the enemy spawn, which is something that frustrated me because I wanted to take a supply truck, but someone was just farming one of the main spawns. But I know that I can just work around this by spawning literally anywhere else and running to that spawn and dealing with them. But I've noticed that this is a topic that gets brought up in Hell Let Loose every now and then, but I'll just leave it at that. But in terms of game modes, you have 2. The first being Warfare, which is essentially a tug of war, and at the start of the game you have to fight for one control point in the middle of the map, and whoever captures that gains that territory, and now there will become 2 active points, and it's up to you and your squad as to whether you want to try and recapture that point or you can defend the point that is in your territory. You win by holding the most capture zones, and this is where communication can come into play because I've seen this happen plenty of times. If everyone goes on the offensive, then you're not going to have anyone defending, and then you're going to lose your defensive point, and then capturing the point that you're trying to capture. This is a little confusing, but it's going to be a waste. You also have an invasion game mode, which is similar to territories in RS2. You have a point, you can either capture it or defend it, and you want to try and capture all the points. But speaking about communication, this is something that I struggle with in this game. Now let's get a game like Squad or Project Reality. I'd say 8 out of 10 times you'll get a squad with people that will talk or at least give basic callouts. The other 2 times might be because of a language barrier, or you joined late and you're in a leftover squad and someone is only squad leader because they're forced to. I was expecting the same in Hell Let Loose, but I found that it can be a lot more inconsistent. Sometimes you'll have people that are very active and speaking, but some other times people won't respond even when you ask for some orders. But I've heard this might be because people know what they're expected to do, but there were times where I'd ask a squad leader for some instructions and I'd just get ignored. But don't let this overshadow the fact that if you do find a squad with people that are actively talking, or you can join a Hell Let Loose community or play with friends, the game is significantly better and it's much more engaging. I just love those moments where you complete an order that the squad leader wanted you to do, and then everyone's just like saying, oh, well done, good job guys for doing that order, and I don't know, I feel so good about it, you know? I got one of them.
Gary's unlocked.
Nice job, guys. Doing well. Yep, Gary's unlocked, guys. Great job.
But I did seek advice on how to work around this, and I was told to join random squads and ask if people have mics, and if I didn't get a response, join another squad, or I can make my own squad and just ask if you have a mic, then you can stay. If not, I can just kick people that won't speak, which I know some people might not agree with, but you know, it's a workaround. But I wish Hell Let Loose had something similar to squad, where you can rename your squad to something like infantry mics, just so people know what to expect when joining a squad. But regardless, I think my experience with microphones and communication in Hell Let Loose has been significantly better than a game such as Counter-Strike. But staying on the topic of communication, similar to squad, if you are in a squad and you see something such as a garrison, a tank, a mass amount of infantry, you can tell the SL, who will then place a marker on the map, and then they'll relay that information to the commander and the other SLs. I really like this because sometimes it's like playing a game of Chinese whispers. One of my squad mates will say something and I'm trying to relay it to the commander, but I might lose a detail or two because I'm just that much under pressure and fear. Also, a funny little thing, some people play with those speakers, and when they use the mic, it actually sounds like they're in a real battle, especially if they're like yelling. It's really funny. But moving on, let's have a look at one of the most important things of a shooter, and that is the gunplay. Most of the animations are nice, except for the grenade animation that could probably use a little tweaking, but the guns sound nice, and like most tactical shooters, all it takes is 1 or 2 hits before you go down. But in terms of gameplay speed and movement speed, it's fairly slow, and you don't want to run around like a madman because you will die a lot. That is a big thing about this game, and if you are one of those people that prefers faster paced gameplay, especially in a tactical shooter sense, you're going to have a bad time. And one thing that just confuses me is people saying that if you like Rising Storm 2 Vietnam, you're going to really like Hell Let Loose, or if you like Battlefield and you want something more hardcore, you're gonna like Hell Let Loose. I really disagree with that because I went into this expecting something like Rising Storm 2 Vietnam but on a bigger scale, and I really disagree with that because I started treating the game more like Squad and my experience drastically improved. And if you are a Battlefield player and you're gonna go into Hell Let Loose, it's going to be a really big shock to your system. You're gonna need to communicate, you're gonna need to follow orders, and sometimes you're just not gonna have to go after and play for kills. You're gonna have to play defensive, and there are going to be moments where you're bored shitless. But everything that you do, especially following orders, will lead to a victory most of the time. But my advice is to be patient, take things very slow, make sure you are never too exposed, and you have some way to hide behind cover if you are in an engagement, because you'll find yourself getting domed from God knows where, and at first this will greatly frustrate you, and I hated this game for it. But I realized I needed to adjust my positioning and the way I think, as well as the way I attack the point. Also, when I first started playing the game, the running speed frustrated me because you're getting shot at and the guy runs like he doesn't have anywhere else to be, or that he's just lost his will to live and he just doesn't care if he gets shot. It's so slow. But I changed my thinking because I can't imagine it's too easy to run with heavy gear on, especially carrying a big gun or like an RPG or a set of tools. So I've rescinded my, I think that's the correct word to use, I've rescinded my criticism on that aspect. But I mentioned previously about artillery, which is a fairly unique thing, but if we look at a game like Squad, you can build mortars and various other gadgets at FOBs. However, in Hell Let Loose, every team gets artillery sites in their main spawn, and they can't be destroyed, but anyone can use them to provide constant artillery fire that consumes a little bit of the team's resources. resources. I didn't know this was a thing in my early days because when I was being constantly bombed trying to capture a point, I didn't realize it was someone actually competent manning the artillery and making our lives a living hell. And I've seen a bit of criticism on this, and some might say, well, dying is a big part of the game, and in World War II this was a big part of it. But my criticism is that someone like me can whip up an artillery calculator and do all the hard work for us and guesstimation and tell me where to calibrate the artillery to hit where I want. Some might say this is no different to using the mortar squad leader method in Rising Storm 2 Vietnam. Some might say you can do what Soviet Wobble did and literally create a real world apparatus to help calculate how to aim, but I've grown accustomed to using it as well as trying not to be bombed to shithouse by them, so I rescind any criticism that I've had about it. But one of the few ways that artillery can be countered is by a recon squad going out and hunting them and preventing people from using them. But to conclude, would I recommend buying this game for the price? And I would say yes, simply because this might be one of the most popular tactical shooters and World War II shooters on the market at the moment, especially given its player count. You won't have any issues finding games in Australia, especially at mostly all hours of the day, because there's usually always one full server. And I'm gonna be honest, it took me a while to get into the game and I downright hated it at time, and I felt like leaving a passive aggressive review on Steam, but I'm thankful that I stuck to it because I can finally say that I like this game. But if you want to see my post-scriptum video, do check out the video that is on screen. If you watch to the end of the video, I am very thankful for it, but I'm going to end today's video there because my name is Tantu and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.